Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Coffin Talk Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, coming to us from Canada, I hope you're watching because you can see real snow in the background from Canada. Canada is the state just north of America, for those of you keeping track. It's, I think, 1,000 miles north of the Gulf of America, and it's, I don't know, how far due west from the continent of America East is it? I'm not sure. But anyway, for all of you tuning in from the global civilization of America, we have a futurist with us, and his name is Jesse Hirsh. And when I booked him, I didn't know who the heck he was, and I didn't care because that's how I am when I book anyone. I don't really care. I just kind of get a feel for whether you're going to belong in the show or not. But then I started reading his Substack and I started interacting with him, and I went on his show, and I would actually call him a legitimate friend, like not a fake friend, not like we're not like texting each other. We're like real friends, and I really like him. And it's crazy because he is a Canadian. So, we have to deal with that, thing. And also, as I introduce you, Jesse, and I'm going to have you come on and answer how old you are, where you grew up, and what generation, if any, you are a member of. But before I get into that, I just want to say it's really cold here in Phoenix today. It's in the low 70s, so please put up with me because I'm trying to deal with I have a sweatshirt on. It's March. This is unseasonably. I know all the snowbirds visiting here and living here who like to infuriate us with driving slow, and a lot of them come from Canada. We learn to recognize the Alberta license plate as the get in the lane, not behind them, because they will start and stop and never drive at the speed limit. So Jesse, how the hell's it going?
Good. You're getting, for everyone watching, you're getting the best dog show I think that we've ever seen on this camera in quite some time. I thought for a moment there, Mike, the longer we spend getting to know each other, the fast that phrase is going to become ancient friends, in the sense that it feels as if we've known each other for many lifetimes. Not to get too woo woo. But remind me what the question was.
Yeah. We ask all our guests, how old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
I'm 50, and I grew up in Ontario. I was born in Montreal, but I grew up in Ontario, different parts of it. Initially Northern Ontario, which is why I'm comfortable in colder weather. But I spent most of my life in Toronto. And very much have a kind of Toronto vibe and a Toronto culture. Although I'm now in Eastern Ontario, kind of due north of Syracuse for American listeners. And I'm kind of happy here. I think this is where I'm going to make my stand. I remember when Douglas Copeland published the book Generation X. And distinctly, not only did I know when it came out that was not me, but at the time, Gen X did not include people born in the 70s. That was later revised. The original conception of Gen X is it were people in the shadow of the boomers. So very close to the boomers versus I'm a child of boomers. Mm-hmm. And historically, that's how people would describe millennials. Mm-hmm. But instead, they revised Gen X to include those of us born in the 70s. So that, we were distinct from people who were born in the 80s. And, I've enjoyed, in listening to your show, I've enjoyed the guests' attitudes on generations. I think it's an excellent opener. And I'm of a mixed emotions. Most of my life, I've thought they're rubbish and complete nonsense. But now I see their value. And I'm fond of sweeping generalizations. And generations are sweeping generalizations. But I think as I age, it is certainly, it's making it easier for me to understand mass culture. Because that's what it's about. Like, there was no such thing as a generation before the boomers. Mm-hmm. Right? We now, in hindsight, what was it? Tom Brokaw, who named the boomers' parents the greatest generation. That was revisionist. They never saw themselves as a generation. And before then, there was no concept of generation. It's important to recognize that the concept of generation is a byproduct of mass media.
Mhm.
That mass media makes generations because the boomers watch the same TV shows. The Gen X people listen to the same musical stuff. And the further along you go from millenniums to Gen Z, the more that fragments and the more that dissipates. So instead of them saying they watched the same TikToks or Vines, they had the same cell phones, or they were part of the same MSN chat, or whatever their moment was. So I think generations as a concept is going to be obsolete pretty fast, because I think it's just a byproduct of mass media. I apologize. I'm rambling. You should cut me off when you want to.
No, I had first of all, I can kind of tell when you're cresting, and then usually you crest quick, which is actually the key to good radio. So you caught yourself, you got it in, and I wanted to hear the end of that. I didn't want to cut you off. Two things, quick. One, I just realized you cannot spell generalization without generation. That's actually funny and interesting to me. And then two, you also helped me realize something, which is before generations, they just had eras, like Victorian era, Elizabethan era. So yeah, it is interesting that people do like to separate boundaries, I think, between themselves and other people to help them understand what's going on, because there are like sweeping movements. The Napoleonic Wars were different from World War I and World War II, but they're still great wars that consumed, the majority of the culture that was participating in war. So yeah, no, I loved your answer. And I'm going to do something I've never done before ever, which is I'm actually going to throw out the only other question we always ask, because I'm worried we're never going to get to it if I don't ask it first. So I'm going to ask you the hardest question of the podcast, which is, what do you actually think is going to happen to you, Jesse Hirsh, when you die? And I just always make sure this is clear. I'm not asking what you think happens to me or anyone else. I just want to know what you think your conscious experience will be.
Honestly, I tend not to think about it. And I would say not out of curiosity, but not out of fear either. Like, I don't think I've ever really feared death. And where I do consider myself a religious person, I don't really think about the afterlife. I don't pay much attention to the afterlife. My relationship with these things has changed a lot since becoming a farmer, because farming and being closer to nature, you encounter death more often. And I think about death more often. But I suppose fundamentally the answer I've always gone to my whole life, that I haven't fully interrogated, but I think my intuition is saying this is the answer I should give you: nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
Absolute nothingness. And I suppose part of me does believe in a continuation. So when I say nothingness, I don't mean an end, right? And there could be something after the nothingness, because I earlier sort of said that we're fast becoming ancient friends, because I do feel that there are some memories of things that came before us, the same way that I believe in the physics argument of we should be able to remember the future.
Mm-hmm.
But my gut says nothingness. And if I were to believe in reincarnation, I absolutely believe that there is a bacterial experience before there is any animal or vegetative experience. So maybe that nothingness is just a metaphor of, I'll just be living at a different scale, my friend. I'll be in the microbe level in my next life. So that's the closest I can come to that answer.
Yeah, that's great, and it got me off on a lot of tangents. I think the one I want to pick at the most is it's interesting how much reincarnation compels me to want to believe in it, which is very different from believing in it. And I think part of it is that desperate need to have continuity from before and after this. But I also do think that deja vu is a great word for a feeling most of us do experience. And that's the closest I can come to saying of evidence for something like what we're talking about. And then it's even weirder because I do feel it with friendships. I do. Like it's just like, I know somehow that you wouldn't push me out the door to save your life. And that's not normal. That's not actually something you just say when you meet people. And what's weird is I get the feeling you wouldn't push anyone out the front door to save your own life. I am actually saying that as a huge compliment, but
no. To a conversation we had recently, I would sure kick JD Vance's ass out the door to save anybody's life but his. Not that I would ever threaten him or mean harm to him. I feel no ill will. But no, I am very subjective. I'm very loyal. I pick sides.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to context. But your point about deja vu, I do think that time is something that exists beyond us. And I think the more you look at physics and the theories around physics and the experiments around physics, it does kind of reinforce a lot of the woo-woo stuff that people talk about that's often, marginalized or dismissed, that I at least now have a more open mind to. Again, because I spend so much time around animals and I spend so much time around plants, that it's allowed me to see that the human understanding of the world is based on arrogance,
Mm-hmm.
and much of it's false. Especially the idea that plants don't think or don't have sentience. Like, allow me to be the crazy radical. Of course they do. Like, absolutely. It's just a matter of what we define as sentience or what we define as, intelligence or awareness or any of that. So I've become, I've always been kind of psychedelic, but living in a farm definitely has brought that to life in a way that I underestimated.
Yeah, and these are a few of the questions I've been dying to ask you on a podcast. I mean, if we were like having coffee, I would have already asked you these, but and I didn't want to bring them up on your podcast because we tend to get focused on. Yeah. By the way, I am going to plug the hell out of his podcast, and I'm going to start posting clips and stuff on my own social medias and stuff. But for real, if nothing else, because I don't personally love like video, and I'm not a super video content consuming person, honestly, just like click on one of his podcasts and at least just watch the intro and watch like how he does it, because it's like a mix between The Price is Right meets like something else, and I just love it as someone who's I was gonna say this earlier. We're part of the same micro generation, in my opinion. I think like 74 to 84 is just this like 10-year period, and so I'm 81. All my friends are older than me. It's like weird and abnormal for me to meet people. My wife is 2 years younger, but she's a total outlier because she doesn't even like she didn't see Top Gun growing up, so she might as well be like 500. But my point is, as far as like connecting with you and all that, I do want to know a little bit more about like your childhood and your upbringing, and I also want to know about your academic educational experiences, because you're very well spoken. I've seen through your bio, I've scoured your page. You were a public speaker, are a public speaker, but my point is, you used to not have the beard and like you looked very like presentable. And I'm saying this as compliments, not to just because where we are today, it might sound like I'm being derisional. But so I do want to know, and you can make it brief or not brief, but you mentioned that you were religious, which I find not fascinating, but very interesting. And so I want to know if that's connected to your parents or not. And I just kind of want to know about your childhood and then your college experience, if you went to college, because I haven't even asked you. So
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, my parents are pretty anti-religious, like proud atheists.
wow.
And my older stepbrother converted to Catholicism, and his dad, who's my stepdad, though really he's my dad,
Uh-huh.
he won't even go in the church.
Wow.
Like when his grandsons would have their communion, he just couldn't go. He would go to the reception after, but like he hates religion, hates that so much. So maybe I'm being a little rebellious. I'll come back to that. My early childhood was spent in a commune in Northern Ontario, and these were U.S. draft dodgers. They didn't like the term hippie; they preferred the term freaks. Like they were really out there. And it really was that baby boomer wave of back to the land. Let's build our own houses. Let's learn how to hunt. Let's do all that. And it up for a bunch of different reasons. It all kind of fell apart. And as it fell apart, the people who had, like my biological parents, kind of switched. Like everyone swapped partners. So all of a sudden, I had 4 parents where previously I had 2. And then we moved to Toronto when I was going into grade 2. So, while I had this very formative experience basically in the bush in Northern Ontario amongst these really crazy radicals, and it was very formative in terms of my understanding of who I was and who my parents or leaders were. But then Toronto's a completely different experience, right? Toronto's very urban, very multicultural. And I love Toronto. Toronto was really where I flowered, where I matured, where I blossomed. And I was really kind of attracted to the Toronto media industry. I did go to university. I did even get a master's degree, although that was a total farce. but I hate academia. I'm allergic to academia. I find academia to be total nonsense and arrogance and buffoonery. But I learned the language. I think part of why you and I get along is we both love words and we love language. In particular, I like the vernacular, right? So I love listening to people talk. I can pick up really quickly how people talk. And Toronto, like New York, is a very oral city, right? It's a very spoken word, like, hey, I'm walking here, right? Like that kind of. So I had a very successful media career in Toronto, public CBC, so public
Mhm.
broadcasting.
Oh,
And for a while, I was the technology correspondent for radio shows right across Canada. So every week, I would do like 25 different morning shows live from Newfoundland right to BC, explaining technology. And I did that right up until the point that I was about to move here. And I flamed out by criticizing CBC's relationship with Facebook, arguing that Facebook was subverting democracy and the public broadcaster was helping it do so. And, it was a great way to go out. It got me a lot of press, got a lot of attention. If any listeners want to Google Jesse Hirsh, CBC quit or CBC Facebook, it'll come up. It was a lot of fun, but it was. Toronto is a failed city state, and I say that in the sense that Canada's experienced a tremendous amount of growth. Toronto has experienced a tremendous amount of growth. They built more condos and more high rises there over the '90s, the aughts, and the tens than anywhere outside of China, and they did not invest in infrastructure. They did not invest in transportation. They did not invest in anything, and the city is in rapid decline. Consequently, I was a little late in getting out of the city in terms of the property value translation, but I was fortunate enough to sell the house I had in Toronto to then buy a farm 3.5 hours outside of Toronto, which, again, if I had done it 5 years earlier, I could have been an hour and a half outside of Toronto. So it all gets into the economics of it. But I wish I had done it sooner, because that early childhood in the bush very much influenced me. And, I love now living in the country. I want to spend the rest of my life living in the country. It's a wonderful experience.
that's awesome. This next question is very personal, but I actually think you're not only going to answer it, but help a lot of our listeners with the answer. Um, I come from two parents who went through divorce, met each other, fell in love, and had me and a brother. My son is from a broken home, and he's being raised by his mother in another country. So I constantly wonder and worry about, and I'm preoccupied with how much does my son hate me because he doesn't understand how much I want to be there for him but can't be, and will that ever change? My question is not about you and your fathers, the two that you had. My question is actually about monogamy and polygamy and relationship forming, because I know you moved to your farm with your partner, and you've mentioned her enough times that I know that you have like a real relationship with her. So I'm just curious, as someone who grew up in the bush, witnessed a very anti-Western type of upbringing, but not necessarily anti-human. I mean, not at all. How do you feel about all this?
So I actually had a guest on MetaViews a month ago, maybe, who studied the most successful polyamorous community in the world, which exists in Portugal. And it did remind me that my entire life I've taken polyamory as normal, for granted. And whether in my childhood, whether in my teens, in my 20s, there's always been people around me who either successfully or unsuccessfully practice polyamory. It is a very difficult, and the people who have done it well fundamentally are excellent at conflict management and mediation. It's not just a life skill. And most of these people are self-described revolutionaries. So it is a real commitment to learn how to do conflict resolution in a very highly proficient manner, and to do mediation in a very, not dispassionate, but professional, right? Capable, trustworthy, credible. Just because we're good friends, I can get into it. The current woman I'm with now is basically my second long-term monogamous partner. I was married for about 12 years, and the woman I was with right before I got married, was polyamorous. And while I was with her, she was with another guy. And I just sort of assumed that we were polyamorous. And so I then went on a date with the woman who then later became my wife. And she got so upset that I did this. And I was like, what? But I thought it was cool. I thought it was, and that's me saying I failed at it, right? Like the level of communication it requires, the level of negotiation it requires, the level of emotional awareness and emotional literacy, which I'm way better at now. But in my 20s, oh no, I was terrible. I had no cope. So the relationship I'm in now, I would say, is definitely the best that I've ever had, because we at our age are more mature than we've ever been. Mm-hmm. But it still ain't easy. It still takes a lot of work. And so I've never thought that I've had the capacity, the labor to handle polyamory. Being in a single relationship is difficult enough for me. Being in two or more, I would just, I just couldn't handle it. But it's, to your point, it's always been normal. There's always been people around me who have been like that. And I'm glad that as a society, it is becoming more open and normal, because A, people should have the freedom to live as they wish. But B, conflict resolution and mediation are the kind of life skills that we should be spreading amongst ourselves, because it makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Wow. That was fascinating. That was a great answer. I'm very compelled to also see how Gen Z is trying, and again, that's an American term for I'd say 27 and under right now in the year 2025.
Well, we use it too, yeah. Right?
But okay.
Gen Z.
Ah, yes, that's right, Gen Z. You've already said so many Canadian things. I was going to call you out on all of them, but my favorite was when you said rubbish, because I always forget that you do use a lot of the Britishisms, because I don't associate that with Canada.
Although my stepdad, who is my dad, mm-hmm. He was born in Britain. He is Canadian, but he spent his first 10 years in Britain, and I have adopted many of his lexicons. And in that regard, that's where you hear a lot of the English, and sometimes I'll even get in a Cockney, right? Versus my mom is where I get some of the Yiddish stuff from, because, she comes from a very Yiddish family and culture, and a lot of that kind of Germanic Jewish language is infused.
Oh, actually, this is a good question about the polyamory too that I didn't even think to ask. So I'm making assumptions in a question form. Did you have multiple parents who had to share authority over no with you? Because it's hard enough for my wife and I to come together with our kids, and imagining another wife and another husband who are secretly taking them to McDonald's, or just all those weird things.
That's why I was alluding to negotiation, conflict resolution, and mediation as part of it, because kids learn fast. And I, granted, we all were. I was a difficult child. Difficult in the sense that difficult to control. You had to get I didn't know the word then, but know it now. You had to get my consent if you wanted me to do something. And I was good at manipulating adults against each other, and finding out who was the most lenient versus strict. But all that requires a lot of communication. And I would say that the period of quote unquote polyamory that existed in my parents' milieu was short-lived, and contributed to the downfall of the intentional communities that they were part of. And my parents, my mom and my stepdad, they were at a certain point very monogamous with each other. Mm-hmm. And even now, they are each other's best friends. And I'm not even sure how much interested they are in the rest of the world. They're into each other, and that's it, especially now that everything seems to be so incendiary. That, versus my biological dad, I guess he's on his third wife. And so again, it varies. And I think part of the conflicts that happen in those communities are traumas that are held for a lifetime and influence future relationships.
For some reason, I just keep being reminded of one of my favorite lyrics ever from the band Nirvana, which is on the last album. Kurt Cobain says, "I always wanted a father, but instead I had a dad." And I'm not really applying that to either of your parents, but it just always caught me as a very, that's why Kurt Cobain spoke to me a lot as a kid, is he was a kid, but I thought he was an adult. But even as an adult now, looking back on this kid's lyrics, I do see some incredible insights that he would have, especially with language. So he was very into wordplay. Thank you, by the way. This is all just fascinating to me, and this is really the metaphysical side of you. Like I'm seeing a lot of how it applies, and I really appreciated what you said about at your age it's easier with your partner now than ever before, because I'm experiencing the same thing. And it's just like, the other day, like I would have started a fight in my 20s and my 30s over something that happened. I didn't start a fight, and oh my god, I'm like incredibly happy, and I can barely remember what the thing was. So like that is a huge part of, I think, growing up and stuff. So speaking of growing up, how have you grown up specifically metaphysically in your life? Like how have you changed from like your 20s to now? Hey everyone, if you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks.
That's an excellent question. I mean, I was metaphysically very advanced in my teenage years and my 20 years because my parents are pro-psychedelic, because our house was filled with records, with books, with art, with all sorts of influences from Siddhartha to Jimi Hendrix to Ravi Shankar. Like again, all of their cultural experiences were available to me from an early age to explore fully and to ask them questions about. So I was that radical in middle school and high school, turning everyone else on, right? And people would come over to my house to listen to records and later to smoke pot, and because it was the safe space. It was where you could do it, because my parents, their whole attitude was, we'd rather you'd be doing this stuff here where we could supervise rather than somewhere else where you could get into danger. And then in my 20s, to your point, I mostly hung out with older people. And I think over my entire life, I always hung out with older people. I was always seeking wisdom from people who had already found it. I always wanted to learn mistakes from people who'd already made them, even though I make my own all the time. But it's still valuable to learn from other people's mistakes. But I mean, I really got into the Black Power movement as a teenager. And that really got, like, the Black Panther Party was an obsession in high school. And that really politically shaped me. But then I got into Taoism in, I guess, my early 20s. And I really did a deep dive into Taoism. I still am. I mean, it's been I'm a lifetime student of Lao Tse and Zhuangzi and the whole kind of broader school of Taoism, which relatedly exposed me to Buddhism and kind of the larger relationship between that kind of holistic thought, that kind of, a contextual or ground-centric world rather than, and in fact, I once wrote this political story about how globalization is Mickey Mouse distracts while Confucius organizes. And it was this idea that corporations were taking the kind of Eastern form of authoritarianism and control that is the Confucian ideal, but within the Western culture of individualism, of Mickey Mouse, of Hollywood. And that was why globalization was so successful in the 90s. And so Taoism has always been there, and it's always been something that is, which is why I'd never really believed in atheism. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I even came to this very technical definition that religion is our relationship with time, and politics is our relationship with space. And space in the sense of Ontario or Arizona or Phoenix or Mississippi Mills, that these are politics governs our communities, but religion governs our time. And I haven't met anybody who's been able to escape time. So therefore, everybody has some relationship to time. So therefore, even if they don't believe in God, even if they don't believe in some higher power, they still are religious in some way, shape, or form. And I've had a lot of fights with people over that, just, for fun, for kicks. And I still fundamentally believe it, but I think my relationship with God as a concept and with death as an integral part of religion has become more profound and deeper, especially since I've become a farmer. But I think the Taoist kind of underpinning, and I even did this one flip where I said Taoism is my politics. in that many people think of Taoism as a religious phenomenon, and there are many Taoist religious, but I'm not part of that school of thought. I'm part of the political school of thought that I like Taoism because it preaches social harmony, right? That we should all live together, we should all get along, and that my religion is anarchism. Because anarchism's not a practical politics. It's this faith that we're going to be good to each other if there's no authorities.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like a religion to me, a faith. I've never experienced a world in which there was no state or no authority. I don't think I ever will. But I like to believe that if it happened, we would be good to each other. But because that's never going to happen, I'm a Taoist who says, let's all get along. Let's focus on conflict resolution and mediation and social work so we can all be friends and eat food and get high and have a good time.
All right, so I'm keeping tabs on questions I want to ask, and I'm just going to let you know that if we get to the 50-minute mark of the interview and I haven't gotten to enough, I'm going to do like a lightning round because I will
do my best to answer as quick as possible.
No, and I'm not trying to press you to answer quickly. I'm saying that I'm already like getting stacks of things I want to ask you about, but I want to switch immediately to something I've only seen in hospice, but it's part of my ethics of animals and how we treat animals. So I'm going to start with a preface for my audience because I don't talk about this a lot on my show. It has been years since I consciously and unconsciously ate meat, but I do not call myself a vegan, nor would I allow other people to call me a vegan. I will break my ethical code when I see fit, and I have, and I will do it again. And I don't care about sharing any of that with anyone because it's actually not important to me to advertise or talk about it. What I do care about is a lack of connections with animals in all of our cultures that I operate within, because I find it depressing, sad, and I also just hate the hypocrisy of people petting their dogs while they eat a big bowl of chicken. It just like bothers me because if they ate their dogs,
because the dog wants that chicken.
Yeah.
Sharing the chicken with the dog. I digress. Please go on.
And so again, it came a lot from teaching ESL where people would bully the Korean students I was teaching and say, have you eaten dog? How could you do that? And I'd be like, you people are monsters. Like, I mean, just like go hack a cow's head off and tell me that like a dog is so anyway, I'm not going to get into all this. I just did, but
you want to talk about the time I hacked a cow's head off?
I want to talk. Yes, actually, I do have a very specific question for you. I call it animus. Animus is the thing in the eyes of a living creature. And what I try to explain to people who have never seen someone die is that even when the eyes are like closed and they're sleeping, you can feel and see animus in something. Like you don't need to walk up and feel the neck to see if someone's died, in my opinion. Of course you do. And like, I'm speaking off the cuff, but with purpose.
Well, and Hollywood has falsely portrayed death all our entire lives. It doesn't work the way you see it on TV and films.
And that's precisely what I want to ask you about is, can you just describe, like without making people turn the podcast off, because there are people who can't hear this, but can you describe what it's like to kill an animal you've raised, knowing that you're doing it with purpose, that you're going to eat it, you're going to use its products? Like, so again, I'm not asking you as a, like, how could you do this? It's the opposite. I'm saying,
let me start by identifying that the problem with the urban psychology as a whole is you've commoditized the process of death rather than recognizing it in its entirety, i.e. how it connects to life and how it connects to other things. And that is what's different, not in establishing loving relationships with an animal, but then eating that animal afterwards, right? And I'm going to dodge your question slightly and offer an anecdote. So if you feel you want to ask it more directly after the anecdote, by all means, because I kind of feel I can't answer the question within our time limits, but that we will answer this question over the course of our ongoing relationship, because it is a larger issue. And I think the way the question's framed precludes a lot of the larger issue. But let me tell you the story of Monch. One of the fascinating things about being a farmer is access to the farmer's marketplace. And I don't mean like the farmer's market. I mean what farmers buy and sell, because farmers buy and sell all sorts of stuff all the time. And, one day, and this was probably like 3 years ago, there was this calf being sold for $50. And when someone sells a calf for $50, it's a calf that's, priced to go. So we were like, okay, let's go pick it up. It was half Jersey, half Angus. So half dairy, half, beef. And we bought it thinking that we would want to raise it and turn it into a dairy cow. And even though it wasn't a full dairy cow, and even though it wasn't a full beef cow, it would still be fine for our needs. So this was, we name all of our animals. This was Comandata Ramona, otherwise known as Monch. And we raised her for a couple of years, bottle fed her, played soccer with her, had a lot. She was a learning curve because she grew to be like massive, a huge cow, and we had difficulty kind of containing her. But at a certain point, she was, even though she lived a good 2 years, she was kind of miserable because she's on her own. Right? We weren't successful in finding someone to help us knock her up so that she could have a kid, and therefore she'd have a friend, and we would have the milk. So we made the decision to put her down and eat her. And, at that point, we weren't fully ready to do it on our own. So we hired this young guy who's a mobile butcher who will come to your property, work with you to slaughter the animal, fully prepare the animal before the butchering, then butcher it, and then cure it, and then chop it up and leave you with the meat afterwards. I think in the end, we had 700 pounds of beef of, different cuts and different ground. And I think we still have some left. So initially we were like, this is the year of Monch, where we would celebrate every time we ate her. But she lasted 2 years and even a little longer. This was a lot of food. So it was a joy to live with her, and it was a joy to eat her. And she had a way better life than she would have if anyone else had bought her at that $50, right? Guaranteed. Not just because she was basically free ranging and able to live and eat and hang out with sheep and goats and horses who she was friends with. But we are then honoring her and celebrating her because we're very much trying to align ourselves with the indigenous local tradition, right? Which isn't factory farming. It's a more responsible a way of living with nature and living with animals. So part of our farming is educational for ourselves, for our friends, for our community, but it's also kind of ceremonial, right? In the sense that, and her death, a huge animal like that was an experience, to your point, and I won't get into the details for listeners, other than to say it changed my perception of death. And since then, I have myself put down animals, partly because in participating in what happened with Monch and watching what happened to Monch, it educated me. It allowed me to understand the process. So it made it easier for me to do it on my own. And my partner now, she's euthanized way more animals than I have, almost always for reasons of mercy, right? Almost always because, and that was the one time we didn't do it ourselves, where it was a horse and we didn't have the capacity and we had to bring in a vet to do it. We just decided that point forward that because we love these animals, we wanted to be the ones to put them down. We wanted to be the ones to put them out of their misery. And again, that's a level of responsibility that if you're a farmer, if you're going to have livestock, you're going to. And not everyone realizes that, but that is really a crucial part of agricultural practices. And that most farmers don't name their animals. They don't have relationships with their animals. But we do, because we have a very different approach to farming and to how this works. So it's emotional, it's even kind of spiritual, but I think it's honest, it's authentic. It dispels some of the myths we have about life and death, and I feel better for it. I feel more mature. I feel a better human being because I understand this process, and I think it makes it easier for me to face human death. In a way that I don't think I would have been able to previous to this.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm able to face animal death easier because I faced human death in hospice. So it's interesting. I do see a total correlation. I also agree with, not agree is the wrong word because you didn't phrase things to agree or disagree with. What you said resonates with me deeply. And I would like to point out that when I said instances of when I would eat meat, like if I visit you at your farm, I 100% will eat your meat and I will enjoy it. And also I would like to say, meat off the bone is the greatest experience in life. Like chewing meat off a bone is to this day my favorite thing ever. So this is not like meat scares me and I'm like, I can't handle it. No, it's the opposite. But I also will say this, I didn't make the decision to stop eating it. It's the only time in my life ever that a decision has just naturally arisen and I followed it. And I tried to buck it, and every time I bucked it, I just didn't feel satiated or good. So I stopped doing it. And I always wondered if that would happen, and I am segueing into my habit with smoking pot, because my dad told me that he just eventually got tired of it and stopped. Guys, I would ask him in my 20s, like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like I'm going to quit this stuff. And so I'm curious about this is where I'm going to flip the tables on you. I am your American expert on your Canadian focused show. I'm going to ask you, as a Canadian, the only difference I always noticed between our cultures, so there are many, but the one that always stood out is you guys are way cooler with pot than we are. Way cooler. Like, your farmers are okay with smoking pot. Your right-wing people are like not anti-pot. Your hockey fans are not like anti-pot. The average NFL fan, up until at least a few years ago, is like staunchly anti-marijuana. And I'm sure Reagan and Nixon have a lot to do with this, but I am curious, what is it like to grow up in a culture that is nicer about it? And how do you feel at 50 about, you call it cannabis, just about it, about what's going on? And like, do you have any anecdotes?
You know, if cultural appropriation wasn't such a sensitive issue, I would point blank tell you I'm a Rastafari. Like Moses did not go up Mount Zion to speak to the burning bush. He smoked the bush. That's what happened. He smoked the bush and he talked to God. That I can believe. Canada's funny. I think, look, part of the reason Canada exists is because in the American Revolution, the British loyalists fled north, and they brought with them a kind of conservative, loyal culture, which I wrote an article about, actually spawned some of our left-wing cultures. The same is true with the draft dodgers. Like, if you think about the reality that a lot of Canadians are former Americans who fled during the 60s, they brought their propensity for marijuana with them. Right? So that, I think, is part of it. Because in my lifetime, the conservatives were against pot. Right? A lot of the normies were against pot, but the grassroots movement for cannabis legalization in Canada has been strong and ongoing. But what really turned the tide was the capitalists, to use economic language, that the cannabis industry, the illegal side, had become such big business that the potential to turn that illegal side legal and make money in the global industry was so lucrative, is so lucrative, that that's what got the conservatives on side. That they realized we are an export-oriented country. Our entire economy is based on either natural resources or agricultural commodities exported to the world, and cannabis is a very valuable agricultural commodity. And that's what's happening. Like, most of Israel, for example, smokes Canadian weed, right? And where America doesn't have as much Canadian weed as it ought to, there are a lot of places, a lot of markets around the world. Australia, for example, are consuming Canadian weed. So it was the economics really that made the difference. But to your point, the grassroots culture was always there. And look, shout out to Trailer Park Boys, right? Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles. They are global celebrities, and they're kind of the Cypress Hill of Canada, right? In terms of being the poster children for legalization during the years of prohibition.
A great answer. Thank you. And now I want to just make it a little more personal about, so here's the thing. I don't regret smoking marijuana, and I have no plans to quit smoking it. And I know when I flub the line between recreational, helpful, and just like, I want to check out and not exist on planet Earth, and this is the legal, quickest, easiest way for me to do it. I also have 2 young children, and unlike alcohol, it does not prevent me from making like positive, good decisions, enjoying my time with them, playing with them. So I have a lot of personal reasons for endorsing it for myself, but I also have learned the very, very, very hard way not to endorse it. This is actually one of the rare times I'm speaking about on my podcast. I don't even know how to explain to my own daughters and my son eventually my relationship to it, only because I do see people who really have a problem with it. I do see that, like, it's not just like salt and pepper on, like, you know, your rice or something. It's that was a weird analogy, but yeah.
Although it is in the sense that there are a lot of people with heart conditions in which salt is something that they should not be adding to food.
yeah, that is true.
And I actually think the analogy here is apt, that this is, not everyone responds to everything the same. And there are many people who have very negative and adverse effects to cannabis, and they should either not use cannabis or not use the cannabis that everyone else uses, but use stuff that is 1/100th the strength, right? Because what has happened over the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years, is the potency has exploded.
Yeah.
Right. So this can have a huge impact. I will say, due to my own stubbornness and rebelliousness, I pretty much abstained from pot until I was about 18, maybe 17. And I'm kind of glad I did, because the research around the impact it has on young brains is substantive.
I agree.
But at the same time, I would probably be an alcoholic if it wasn't for cannabis. And I don't like to drink at all. And, you said something the other day that, people who don't drink any alcohol, the health correlation is substantive. And that is absolutely true, because alcohol is sugar. And the more sugar you have, the more you are really hurting your body and your digestive system and your biota. So cannabis, to me, that's my vice. And I'm happy to do that instead of heroin. I'm happy to do that instead of alcohol. And I can grow it myself. I have, and I can if I need to. But to your point, what's great about Canada right now is there's stores everywhere. There's a lot of competition. It's cheaper than it's ever been my entire life. And in fact, the shop that I love going to, I go to the grocery store first. I go to the bakery and the discount aisle in the bakery, where they have like the muffins or brownies or cookies that are about to expire. And I buy a dozen and I bring them to my friends at the weed shop. And they love me, right? Because I bring them sweets and they give me, my buds, and everyone's happy. So
that's cool. I like that you just...
Why we are fighting for Canada's survival.
I also like that you knocked sugar, and then you mentioned that you bring sugar to your dealer. So you're like,
I don't eat it.
Yeah. No.
They're giving me drugs. I'm giving them drugs. It's the only legal drugs I can give them.
Oh, I mean, the hardest part of parenting for me, not for anyone I know, because even my wife would just look at me and say, this is why it's hard to parent with you. I hate giving my kids sugar, because I know what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, and it's what happened to me and everyone else in our generation. But anyway, I do want to keep this
quickly on that point, though. My partners, I haven't allowed to have drunk food and sugar in the house. Like, not even kids. Like, the people I live with, I'm like, no, we can't have this in the house. Like, I'll bring you a chocolate bar when I come back from the grocery that you eat right away, but we cannot have this sugar in the house, because I will succumb. Anyway, Go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's actually interesting. And what I wanted to ask you, because it does apply to marijuana, it applies to everything we've talked about. And also, I kind of want to give people a little bit of a preview for like how intelligent and interesting you are when it comes to talking about philosophy, and which is different from metaphysics to me, although metaphysics could be a branch of philosophy, but philosophy governing humanity on Earth in this time period that we all believe in, or time, space connection. My question for you is, I have become obsessed with the idea of social control recently, because I see how important it is to have social control. And then I see how horrifying all my life it is to watch people vie for inappropriate social control. So in my country, for example, the repealing of marijuana laws and the eventual, some states have it legalized, is an example of what I've witnessed in a positive direction, but then also what's going on right now with Musk, the Doge, and Trump and everything politically is an example of what I don't like as a person who sees social control as a necessary thing. What is your philosophy really about social control?
If I'm to answer, honestly, it depends on who's in control, I guess. I suppose, like any corrupt, evil human being, I have some weird voice in my head that's saying, what if you were in control? Wouldn't you want social control? Part of me thinks social control is impossible, that control is an illusion, and that I agree with you. There's always been people who have desired social control. But my gut response, as you are formulating your question, as you are articulating your question, is let us look at influencers. Because I've actually been studying influencers on both a scholarly level in terms of my master's degree, but also professionally after that. They are an example of people who want to be controlled and want to control. Because on the one hand, by definition, influencers are people who have submitted themselves to the algorithm's control, right? And the most extreme example of this is Mr. Beast, who has zero cultural contribution to society, but who has perfected understanding what will go popular on YouTube, right? What the algorithm will bring to people. So professionally, by definition, an influencer is someone who has submitted themselves to the algorithm in return for attention. in return for followers. And then what do? They turn around and try to control their followers, right? Try to tell their followers what to do. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe, buy my t-shirt, look at my merch, right? The Logan Paul and Jake Paul are another obscene example of this. And of course, they're almost de facto part of the regime. They're part of the WWE MMA wing of the Trump administration. Because not only do they themselves submit to the social control of our moment, but they then turn around and control the kids who follow them and the suckers who buy into their scams and their merch and their all that crap. So I share your concerns. I see a culture of social control and the incentives for social control being baked into our media system. But since we started this talking about Taoism, I don't believe in control. I think control is an illusion. I think humans are like cats, but even smarter. And anytime anyone tries to control us, we escape. And that's why I love my goats, because they have a similar kind of incendiary. But look, I'm conscious that we have limited time. So let me take a quick tangent and bring it back, because I came with my own agenda, because I don't get to talk about this stuff too often.
No, this is great. Yeah. And this is how we're going to end. So just go, run with it.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I gave up on life. Like, I was genuinely ready to die. If I had easy access to heroin, I would not be here right now. And it was a combination of health issues, because I got a lot of health issues. But it was, to your point, the political, cultural climate we find ourselves in. Because I have, throughout my life, suffered from a kind of depression where I just don't see a role for myself in this society. Like, I just don't see, and when I say society, I don't mean you're in my society. I mean capitalist society, right? Like, I don't see any companies that I could go work for that they would pay me what I think I'm worth, right? And I don't see any jobs that I could go do on the terms that I'd want to do them. Like, I'd happily work at the local grocery store for the 10% staff discount if I could work when I want to work, not when they want me to work, which is a deal breaker. So if it wasn't for my mom, if it wasn't for my partner, because they sure wanted me to live, I would be dead today. And it was obviously a transformative moment. And I spent the year after that kind of reconstructing my life and thinking, all right, if I'm going to live, what am I going to live for? And I think what I came out of that with is I'm living for today, right? I'm living for right now, right? I'm probably smoking more cannabis now on a daily basis than I have in my entire life ever. Because I'm living for today. It feels, like that's how life is. So I'm not in any way afraid of death. I still secretly think I welcome death. But it was that moment of giving up on life that, it was a real moment of clarity for me. And I'm grateful to the people who wanted me to live. I currently want to live now. I'd like to continue wanting to live. But I wish more people had conversations about that. And we're open about that. And that's why I love the work that you're doing in terms of not just destigmatizing death, but creating opportunities for people to think about it, to normalize it, to be okay with it. Because I think that's crucial if we're going to get through this dystopia that, is creeping up all around us.
That was incredibly profound. Thank you. And I had a similar moment, but it was in a weirder order. But when I was 18, I went alone to college far away from home, very much intentionally. And then I was pretty much eating my words. I was lonely. I missed all my friends. I was jealous that they'd all gone to different local colleges where they had, communal people they already knew. I was having trouble fitting in. I didn't like myself, my body, my anything. And then one day I felt really sick and couldn't eat. And I ended up not eating for over a week. My mom flew from out of town. We went to a doctor and they diagnosed me with cancer. And then 2 weeks later, I still wasn't eating. I had lost like a bunch of weight and I was really depressed. And one night, like this internal voice that I now recognize as intuition, and it's not a voice, but I always describe to people this way. It's a thought that I give words to, but it's an impulse. It said, I thought you wanted to die. Like, just really simply. And I was like, no. I was like, not serious. I don't want to die. And to me, it resonates with what you said because it was physical health was declining. And it was like, oh, really? So like that body you say you hate and that like life you say, is it really not worth it? Because we were just listening to you. We were just following your direct orders. And so I immediately woke up the next day, ate food, felt fine, went to a cancer specialists, and they did the blood draw, and they were like, we don't really see this often, but it does happen. You're in complete remission. Come back. And I never went back. And now it's been 30 years. So
there is no mind-body separation.
Yeah.
Those things are all one.
And
Continue.
Well, I think what the larger point I'm trying to make is I've always given my friends permission to end their life if they want to. And it's a weird take, and it's not popular. And I've only done it in privacy, but I've done it with enough people to know that actually helps people not do it. Like giving people permission. So I don't know what your mom and what your partner did, and I don't know how it worked for you, but I do know that thank you, because part of this show is an attempt to just let people know it's not easy for anyone. I've had bigger guests and I've had smaller guests, and it's not easy for any of us. And the people who are online saying how easy it is and how successful it is, even if they're lying, it's not healthy to do that, but it's also probably wise to at least analyze the positives and negatives of it, because there is something to be said for faking it. And what you said about smoking more than ever before and facing the day, this is where we're exactly locked in step, is it has nothing and everything to do with politics in the world. But I have really just realized recently, my best memories in life are like as a child being forced to get in a car with my family and just like our family dynamic. And now I have that. I finally built my dream, which is to have my family. And so like, I'm just not like, I'm not striving as much, and it's hard. It's hard to write essays and wake up and like continue this entire life I built around me. Like, just,
yeah.
And so I see it the same with you. And again, I hate when people say you need to have children to get this. You don't. It's such a crock.
To prove your point, my whole life I fantasized about a revolutionary cadre, right? a group of people who, when the man showed up, they'd be there. And now I've got it in the form of dogs and goats and a couple of horses and some pigs and some cats and some birds. And I all get along with them. I all understand them. I'm like, these are my people. So that's where I say to folks listening at home, like a pet can be that. Yeah. Right? A few pets can be that. Like it is remarkable the relationships we can have with animals that our anthropocentric society is in denial about, because we are animals. Mm-hmm. And therefore we can connect with animals in the same way that we connect with human beings. Slightly different, but to your point, still as rewarding. The dynamic, the love, it can still be just as fulfilling.
Yeah, so I'm really glad we ended with that I got you to, I didn't even ask you, but like that you brought that up and talked about it, because I think that is the whole point of Coffin Talk, if I really were to summarize it, is just to help people see that it's not easy for anyone, but it's also not tragic for anyone. And depending on when you ask them, it's tragic or not tragic. And that would be my story with my son, for example. So in closing, as you know, you listen to Coffin Talk. I don't like to leave the audience with my last word, except to give my spiel. So what would you like to leave our audience with today?
Other than what I earlier said about trying to live every day, I think it's important to live for other people or to live for other beings. And that could be your children, that could be your parents, that could be your pets, that could be your neighbors, that could be some total random stranger that you pick at will. But we are living in a society right now in which the random acts of kindness and spreading joy is so absolutely crucial. Right. And I say this because we are in a mental health crisis. There is nowhere near the level of support or infrastructure that people need. And what we're seeing is having them take it out on retail staff. They're taking it out on, servers at restaurants. They're taking it out on anyone that they can get access to. And that is why it is so unbelievably crucial that we spread joy everywhere we can. And that doesn't mean that you got to be authentic. You can fake it. It's totally fair to go through protocol and do it just because you feel you got to do it. But that's my last word is I feel until I die, whether sooner or later, I need to spread happiness and joy, except to my enemies. But to everybody else, which is 99.99999% of everyone, love and joy to them. And it only comes back tenfold.
That is awesome, everybody. This is Jesse Hirsh. He will be featured on next week's premium subscription podcast. I've already booked him. And I'm also going to be a regular on his podcast. So more details about all that. But really quickly on what he just said, here's a really easy way to do something kind every day of your life. Wake up, go on Yelp, pick a business you like, and leave a positive review. Because right now, more than ever, is a time where people just love to only give negative reviews. Also, like, and I'm not saying this for me, but go to someone's Substack page or their Instagram, whatever it is, and just heart something. Like, those are random little acts that you can do from home on your mobile phone in a car, and they do make someone's day better. Like, if someone sees an extra amount of likes on their page, no matter how pathetic you may or may not think that is, it does obviously affect them, because we've seen the opposite, which is what it feels like when people don't feel like they got enough likes. So the inverse has to correlate. So anyway, that's just my way of tipping in on what Jesse said. Jesse, you're such a good friend. You're such a great guest. You guys, I cannot stress this enough. I cannot wait to read this article on CBC and you. I already found one and I'm just dying to read it.
You gotta actually listen to the audio. There is audio on the internet of when I did it live.
Is it the Canada Land, an issue worth torching your job over?
Yeah, the Canada Land episode is me talking about it afterwards, but the live audio is around.
Okay.
And it's pretty electric because it was entirely spontaneous.
I cannot wait to see this, because this is like definitely something I just have to see with my own eyes. But again, in the notes will be how to find Jesse and everything. I don't like to say it on air because it just goes over people's ears. So please check the notes. You'll see how to connect with him. And as always, the best way to support me and this show is to head over to mikeyop.com. That's MIKEYOPP.com, and sign up for the free once a week letter I write. Sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's an essay, sometimes it's just random gibberish that actually usually that's what people like the most. So we'll see, but I just do it whimsically and I do it on my own schedule. To everyone listening, once again, you have been listening to Jesse Hirsh talking to me. My name is Mike Oppenheim. This has been another episode of Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.